I get to say good morning again, so good morning again. And again, I get to say Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. Enjoy your day with social distancing and all, and let's all make it a great effort today to love on Mom. Last Sunday, we started a series from the Old Testament book of Job, and we talked about how that God talked a lot about God being in control. And we said, even though it might not seem like it right at this minute. We also said that there are some right in the middle of this pandemic that have reached the conclusion that, well, if God is in control, then maybe he doesn't care so very much about me. Because how else do you explain the pain that we're experiencing right now on this planet? From little things like a dead battery in your car to big stuff like cancer. How do you explain when things don't go the way that we think they should? There's a religious belief out there called deism. And deism would tell you that God got all the engines of the universe running, that he set it all up, but that he really doesn't intervene in our lives. The idea is that God created the universe, but after that, he just sort of sits and watches. That he doesn't actually really intervene in our story, in my story, or change anything. But that's simply not true. If we remember from last Sunday, Job believed in God. He worshiped God. Was a regular part of his life. And Job wants to believe that God is in control and that God cares. But in losing everything, he sees evidence that maybe God is out of control and maybe not as caring. Remember last Sunday that Job lost everything he had. He lost all of his livestock, which were his means of business. He lost all of his teams of oxen, can't plow. He also lost all of his servants, except for the couple who came to bring him the bad news of disaster. He lost all of his children. As a parent, I want you to put yourself in that place and say, what would that be like? He lost all of them on the same day, same incident. House collapsed on top of all of them. And what we look at next is God gives Satan permission to turn all of that loss and add to it attacks on Job's health. Here's Job chapter 2 and verses 1 to 7. On another day, the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them to present himself before him. And the Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Just like in chapter 1. Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming through the earth, going back and forth on it." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears me and shuns evil. And he still maintains his integrity, though you incited me against him to ruin him without any reason." You see, Satan? This guy has maintained his integrity. Here, Satan, just like the first time in Job chapter 1, is challenging the truthfulness of God's words and the motives of Job's character. He's basically saying the only reason Job was worshiping God was because you gave him all kind of good stuff. So here's Satan's new argument. Verses 4 and 5. "Skin for skin," Satan replied. "A man will give all that he has for his own life. But now stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face." Satan is saying, affect his health. Let me affect his health, and he'll curse you right to your face. Those other things, well, they were kind of just stuff. Affect his own body, affect his own life, and he'll curse you. Skin for skin was a proverbial saying that had to do with trading animal skins. Satan was insinuating that Job would trade the loss of all of his animals, the loss of his servants, the loss of his children for his own life. Here's verse 6. The Lord said to Satan, "Very well then, he is in your hands, but you must spare his life." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and affected Job with painful sores. Now, these painful sores, the literal words translated there, indicate festering boils. I don't know if anybody's ever had a boil, but festering boils. Some have likened it to smallpox, because they were from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. Inflamed, ulcerous sores. And as we read through Job, some of the other things here that he suffered as well. Not only ulcerous sores, but itching, degenerative changes to the skin, loss of appetite, depression. Are you kidding me? I guess. Loss of strength. This one gets me. Worms in the boils. Difficulty breathing, depression, weight loss, foul breath, blackened skin, and fever. This was a real cocktail of disaster and trouble. Verses 8 to 10. Then Job took a piece of broken pottery and scraped himself with it as he sat among the ashes. Now, the place that he sat among the ashes was outside the city where everyone lived. It was where they burned their trash. Here's this guy that was in great stead, a wealthy man. And he goes from that to sitting on an ash pile, scraping his sores with a broken piece of pottery. Verse 9, his wife said to him, "Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die." He replied, "You are talking like a foolish woman." The words here, foolish woman, indicate she was spiritually ignorant, spiritually not very discerning. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? In all this, Job did not sin in what he said. Mrs. Job, she had enough. She had enough pain and suffering. She's done with God, and she wants Job to be done with God too. So last week we touched on some questions from God to Job that indicated God's power and his strength. And we saw that he is strong and that he is in control. But here's the question for today. Is he tender? Is he kind? Does he care? Does he care? You know, one of the most common descriptions of God in Scripture is that of Father. So we ask, what kind of father is he? When my son Christian was little, he would come into our room at night when he needed something. But here's what I figured out. What he needed determined what side of the bed he went to. I'm sure you're like this. If you're married, you probably have a side of the bed. Anybody have a side of the bed? Come on, raise your hands. And ever it shall be. It's just the way it is. You don't mess with the side of the bed rules. If you doubt this, tonight when you go to bed, get in the wrong side and see how well that goes for you. We have our sides of the bed forever and ever. Amen. Christian, as a kid, knew which side of the bed we slept. And depending on what he needed, that was the side of the bed he went to. If he was scared and wanted protection, he usually came to my side of the bed. If he didn't feel good and he needed comfort, he usually went to my wife Martha's side of the bed. My side was protection, Martha's side was comfort. If ever he wasn't sure, he usually came to my side of the bed by default because Martha was impossible to wake up. And I kind of slept with one eye open. Here was the break in that rule, though. If there was ever throw up involved, then I would actively help him wake up Martha. There were certain things that I just didn't do well with. Throw up was one of them. So we understand God's power and his strength. But it seems Job walked around to the other side of the bed to find out, well, God, do you care? Are you tender? Are you kind? And in Job chapters 38, 39, and 40, God is asking Job questions. Remember, he starts off with grand questions that we talked about last week about the universe. Where were you, Job, when I laid the earth's foundation? Job, do you know how many snowflakes are going to fall? Job, do you move the constellations around in the sky? Was that you, Job? Because I don't remember seeing you doing any of that. And what becomes clear is that God is in control. We wouldn't even be alive, as we talked last week, about God's control of the universe. But then the focus of God's questions go from astronomy to biology. He goes from questions about the expanse of the universe to talking about, well, caring for nature. Job 38, verses 39 to 41, God asked Job, Job, do you hunt the prey for the lioness and satisfy the hunger of the lions when they crouch in their dens or lie in wait in the thicket? You do that? Hey, Job, little question about the birds. Who provides food for the raven when its young cry out to God and wonder about for lack of food? Is that you? Chapter 39, verse 1 and 2. Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Do you watch when the doe bears her fawn? Do you count the months till they bear? Do you know the time they give birth? Job. And we start to see this picture of God that is more tender as he provides and he cares for the animals. Job 39, 5 to 8. Job, who let the wild donkey go free? Who unties its ropes? I gave it the wasteland as its home, the salt flats as its habitat. It laughs at the commotion in the town. It doesn't hear a driver shout. It ranges the hills for its pasture, and it searches for any green thing. Job, you want to weigh in here? Verses 9 to 12. Will the wild ox consent to serve you? Will it stay by your manger at night? Can you hold it to the furrow with a harness? Will it till the valleys behind you? Will you rely on it for its great strength? Can you trust it to haul your grain and bring it to your threshing floor? Anybody ever see the movie Secretariat? I know Martha and Brian have seen it because I made them watch it. I love this movie. The opening lines to the movie about this great racehorse, Secretariat, starts with these lines. It's Job chapter 39, verse 19 through 24. I'm going to read all of those to you because I just like this movie so much. Do you give the horse its strength or clothe its neck with flowing mane? Do you make it leap like a locust, striking terror with its proud snorting? It paws fearlessly, rejoicing in its strength, and it charges into the fray. It laughs at fear, afraid of nothing. It does not shy away from the sword. The quivers rattle against its side, along with the flashing spear and lance. In frenzied excitement, it eats up the ground. It cannot stand still when the trumpet sounds. Did you do any of that, Job? Let's go back to birds, Job, 26 to 29. Does the hawk take flight by your wisdom and spread its wings towards the south? Does the eagle soar at your command and build its nest on high? It dwells on the cliffs and stays there at night. A rocky crag is its stronghold. I almost imagine kind of God sitting with his arms crossed going, Job, you're next. And God is pointing out these different animals and how he protects and he provides and he cares about them. And Job realizes that God is just not a cosmic controller. He's a caring creator who delights in his creation, who is thoughtful about what he's created and how he provides. Did you know that an eagle has an eyesight that is 4 times sharper than ours? An eagle has what is called dual focused vision. It allows the eagle to see what is in front of it and what is beside it at the same time. Not peripheral vision like we have, dual focus vision. And God saw fit to give that to the eagle. There's a passage in Job chapter 12 and verses 7 to 10 where Job says that one of the ways we understand God is by talking to the animals. For years I told Martha when I took the dogs for a walk in the woods, when I took our dogs for a walk in the woods across the street, that we would talk about her. Yeah, we go in the woods and the dogs talk about you. Sounds a little crazy, doesn't it, to talk to the animals? But listen to the poetry in this. Job says, but ask the animals and they will teach you, or the birds in the sky and they will tell you, or speak to the earth and it will teach you, or let the fish in the sea inform you. Which of all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In his hands is the life of every creature and the breath of all mankind. God is a sovereign God who holds all things in his hand. Just look at the animals and how God takes care of them. Listen to their story, and you can't help but see a sovereign, caring God. So let's do that. Let's take Job's advice. For example, let's understand the woodpecker. We've all seen them. A woodpecker's head goes greater than 15 times per second. Its head is literally moving at twice the speed of a bullet. And theoretically, that speed and that pounding, it should kill it. But God has given it some type of shock absorber between the brain and the beak to protect it from harm, to allow it to bang trees to search for food, to allow it to hollow out trees so it has a place to nest. Biologists and engineers have not been able to come up with anything that matches the shock absorber in the head of a woodpecker. Don't believe the woodpecker? Maybe we should ask the honeybees. Honeybees go out in search of plant nectar, and with that they've become the greatest pollinators of plants. But the bees return to the nest with the nectar, and then they tell the other bees where they found it. How do they do that? It took scientists a long time to figure it out. They don't say, well, you leave the nest and you fly about 500 yards and then you take a slight left at the hickory tree and then a slight right and you go about a half mile, and that's not how they communicate. What they do is this intricate dance to tell the other bees where they found flower nectar. Are you kidding me? They communicate by dance. Now, I got to tell you, I'd be in a lot of trouble if I was a bee. I am not John Travolta. God is making sure his creation is cared for. Maybe you can ask a pigeon. Pigeons can fly thousands of miles to the same roosting place without any navigational challenges at all. There's a species of bird called the Arctic tern. It can fly 25,000 miles from one destination to another, and it never gets lost. It doesn't have any navigational problems at all. Scientists believe that it has inside a magnetic system that allows them to understand direction, sort of like how a GPS system works on magnetism. Job will tell you to ask the birds about a sovereign God, to ask the birds about a tender God. And that's basically what we talk about in Job chapter 39. You know, you can tell a lot about an artist by their art. You can tell a lot about a creator by his creation. And so the creation speaks of the power and the strength of God, but it also invites you to the other side of the bed to discover that God is thoughtful and tender and cares. Now, God doesn't answer Job's specific questions, and maybe that's what we want. We want to put God on a stand and interrogate him. We want to ask questions and demand explanations. But I need to tell you the reality of it is, God doesn't owe Job, well, or you or me, an explanation. He is God. Instead, he asks a series of questions to make it known to Job that he knows, and he sees, and he cares. And the question to us is out there. And even though you don't have all the answers to all of your questions, do you believe he cares? Imagine you're a parent and you take your 3-year-old daughter to the doctor for shots, where she's going to get poked with needles and experience pain. Anybody like needles? No, of course not. When you're 3, you think you like needles any better? And the little girl cries and she asks why. And you can give her the statistics. You know why. Honey, we need these shots to prevent an illness down the road. Or this vaccination. Or this is needed to help you recover from what's going on right now. She doesn't get it. She's 3. She's not capable of understanding that. She's not capable of understanding that. All she knows is that you took her to a place where she got poked with needles, and now she's supposed to believe that you still care about her. How do you explain that? Here's a way. You take your little daughter over to the hall closet and you open it up and you show her the blankets that are stored in there. And you ask her, do you know why those blankets are there? And she says, for when I'm cold. And you take her over to the pantry and you open it up and you show her food and you ask, do you know why all that food's in there? for when we get hungry? Well, you see that hall closet and you see that pantry, and I'll add in the refrigerator and this house, and all around you is evidence that you're cared for by us. And that's what God does for Job. And Job sees God's provision in ways he never understood before. Part of that is because when we first met Job, he didn't really need anything. Remember, he was rich. He had everything. Thousands of donkeys and camels, and he had everything he needed. There was nothing pressing on him. No desperate needs. He was a wealthy man, and suddenly it's all stripped away. In the end of the book of Job, Job 42:5, last week we mentioned this. We remember Job says to God, "My ears have heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you." I get it now, God. When Job sees his need for God, he sees God. When all the stuff gets stripped away, he sees God like he never has before. Let me tell you about one more bird. It's called the golden plover. It's about the size of a finch, a couple of inches tall. Every year, the golden plover makes a 2,500-mile journey from Alaska to Hawaii non-stop. What? Non-stop? Estimates are that it beats its wings over 300,000 times consecutively. When scientists look at the flight, it's not technically possible. From a fuel, from an energy, from a physical, from a muscular standpoint, it's not possible. Technically, they estimate that the golden plover should crash about 81% into the trip. It should technically just fall into the sea and be no more. But I think maybe that's when you think of the God of the golden plover. Because it seems like many are tired, a lot of beating wings, maybe not sure you're going to make it, too far, too long, not even sure you're going to be here or going to last. And at 81% of your trip, you can't go on. But this is where you will meet God. When you're tired and you're weak and you can't go any further, that's where you meet God in a way that you never have before. Maybe you've heard about him, but now you can see him. There's something about seeing our needs that allows us to see God. You know, God teaches us to pray, "Give us this day our daily bread." But honestly, when was the last time we prayed that? I just stop at Boyer's because they have lots of bread. God says, "Don't be anxious about anything, but make your requests known to me." Beautiful invitation, but God, I got this new prescription from my doctor and I'm doing good now. God says, "I will meet all of your needs." Good, great to know that that's there, God, but I got a pretty good job and my insurance is pretty good and I have some retirement money set aside. God says, "Come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest." Rest, God? Do you mean like a day at the spa? Do you mean like time on the golf course? Because, that's what I really miss right now, time on the golf course. That's what I could use in my life right now, God. See, what we've done is surround ourselves with all of this stuff, all these supports, and many miss the opportunity to see God. Because God goes from being nice to being necessary when we recognize our need for Him. I've seen it. I've been in mansions and I've been in clay huts. I can tell you where you're most likely to see God. I've seen Him show up at graveside services. I've seen Him in cancer wards, in hospitals for kids, tons of waiting rooms. I've seen Him in food kitchens. I've seen Him kneeling down beside a bed of someone in prayer who desperately needs Him. David said in Psalm 34:18 that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. And in 1 Peter 5:7, God teaches, cast all your anxiety on me, on Him, because He cares for you. So the question is, do you believe that? Do you believe God is not only the cosmic controller, but that He is the caring creator? If you don't believe that, this week take some time and read through Job chapter 39. Talk to the woodpecker, or the honeybee, or the pigeon, or the golden plover. And they will tell you of a sovereign God and a tender one. But the greatest evidence of a loving, caring God is the cross. Jesus died for me. I'd like all of us to say that personally now. Whether you're here or remote, say it out loud. Jesus died for me. You want to talk about a loving God? The creator, the sustainer, the one who's in love with us. Jesus died for me.